We continue Big South Member Recognition Week with the Winthrop Eagles and interim women's basketball head coach Semeka Randall. Coach, great to see you.
How you doing, Mark? Thank you for having me.
Oh, we're excited to get to know you a little bit more as you begin your first year leading the Eagles. You were the associate head coach last year, and you were a head coach 8 years prior to that. So how has the transition been for you getting back into the head coach's chair?
Well, I would say transition, you throw COVID on top of this, it's been touch and go trying to navigate through this. But as far as the X and O and trying to get to know student athletes and working with administrators and recruiting, that's doable. But with this COVID, it has been very, very challenging. And the biggest thing, trying to keep our student athletes and myself and staff safe.
So in addition to COVID, what were some differences that you've experienced compared to your previous head coaching stops in taking over a program?
Well, I would say one of the difference, I think if I had to go back down memory lane of something that I didn't do particularly well was really getting to know our student athletes. So as I, on this third time around, I've tried to take the initiative to have intimate conversations with our student athletes. Obviously, I've re-recruited them and their parents, but then weekly or sometimes twice a week, try to call in and check and just really know about them, getting to know what they like to do, what makes them happy, what's exciting going on in their world, or if they're having a bad day, I can really read it because of the work that I've put in during this COVID time, whether it's been a phone call or a Zoom call, but being able to have that interaction has been helpful for me.
We're going to get on to your collegiate days in just a minute, but I know you've had a successful run at some other programs as an assistant coach. Just walk me through again those great programs you got to be a part of.
So I'll share this story with you. Michigan State. So first, I was still my goal was my last year of my contract at San Antonio Silver Stars in the WNBA. I didn't know if I was coming back, but I had signed a contract to go back to play in Israel. I receive a phone call from my mentor, but my former coach, Al Brown, who his last coaching stop was at Duke University, but he's been everywhere on the men's and women's side. He was a coach at Tennessee. He calls me and says, "Hey, Semeka, you should come up here to Michigan State because we're going to win a championship." And I'm like, win a championship? Michigan State? Who is that? Outside, I know who Tom Izzo was, but the women's team, I'm like, no way. And so I thought about it. And so I was like, maybe this might be good. I had just had my one experience at Cleveland State, and I really enjoyed the opportunity that was given to me. Again, Al Brown lead me into that situation. And I'm like, he really think they're going to win a championship? Like, there's no, well, okay. So I decided to do it. So Al tells me that I should really consider this. So I said, you know what? I won't go play, even though I signed my contract to go to Israel. I decided to trust him and jump in there with him. And Joanne P. McCauley was the head coach at the time. So we had a pretty good conversation. And I'm like, okay, I'm fired up, ready to do this. So I get there, and it's really amazing because all those young ladies were like a bunch of no-name ladies. But my God, they worked so hard, and they were bought in. They were a team. So we're in Indy for the Final Four, 2005. We're in the Final Four. I'm like, well, Al, you're a pretty smart guy. He's like, I told you. And so we're playing Tennessee in that game, semifinal game. We're down by 17. And I was like, well, Al, we didn't really get to the national championship. I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, our girls ran out of gas. But this was a pretty incredible run for my second year in college coaching. Well, our athletes was in the locker room talking and sorting things out. Next thing you know, we come out at halftime, down by 17. We come out and win the game. And I'm like looking down like, Coach, are you going to call a timeout? What are you going to do? And so our kids ended up winning, and we actually played in the national championship, Michigan State versus Baylor. That game could have went either way. Obviously, both teams were gassed because Baylor had beat LSU, where we beat Tennessee. So technically, it was supposed to be Tennessee and LSU probably in the championship, like normal. But two teams that no one knew playing for the national championship, and they just had a young lady who was a spark off the bench who came out and separated, and they ended up winning. But not bad year two of coaching in a national championship. So I could say I coached in one and also played in one. So that was pretty cool right there.
Well, you mentioned Tennessee in that story. You played there collegiately. You were an All-American great player during your time, more than 1,900 career points. Won a championship as well under the legendary Pat Summitt. So what was that experience playing for her?
I stayed in her doghouse a lot. It was a great experience. Coach Summitt recruited me when I was in 8th grade. So the relationship when I got there was extremely strong. I absolutely just respected her, loved her. Although I was fiery a player, and I butted heads with her, and I eventually realized my junior year that this was her program and I had no control over it. So I eventually fell in line, but I just have the utmost respect for her and what she's done for me in my life. It's not so much all about basketball. Like, yes, every day I would run through a brick wall for her, but it's the things she taught me off the court that matter and stuck the most with me.
So what were some of those things that you learned from her and is now part of your coaching?
Oh my gosh, time management, change is a must. And these are some of her definite dozens, which we had to always kind of remember all the time. Like she every once in a while, tell me what this is, Randall. And so we had to kind of tell her those things. Take responsibility. It's not about you. Like, you have to see the bigger picture and learning how to be selfless out there on the floor. So all of those things that I find myself repeating to my student athletes today.
So after Tennessee, you played 4 years in the WNBA, and you mentioned a little bit earlier. So what was that? What were some of your memories that you had playing in the WNBA?
I mean, super great memories. I mean, first of all, how it's funny. I thought I was going to be a first-round draft pick, and Deanne Nolan, who actually had one more year of eligibility remaining in college, decided to come out early because she had a redshirt year. So I was like nervous wreck when I got drafted because I'm like, oh, I'm not in first round. I don't think I'm good. And so second round, first pick, going out to the Seattle Storm, I'm like all the way out there, but enjoy Coach Dunn. She's hilarious, good people, just love competing for her. And then I got traded from Seattle over to Utah and then Utah to San Antonio. I mean, great cities to play in. Play for some really amazing coaches. Play for D. Brown. Like, that was really cool playing for a person that I watched growing up in terms of the NBA. And I was trying to get him to give me a pair of his Reebok pump-up shoes.
That's great. So in addition to the WNBA, you played internationally. You mentioned earlier you were in Israel. What events and what other countries did you play in, and how was that experience?
Well, the interesting thing with with the Israel, I left right after September 11th. I was supposed to leave on that day. And so got a little nervous. My mom thought I was crazy. And I asked them, instead of flying me from Cleveland, Ohio, which is where I'm from, to New York to Tel Aviv, I was like, I want a different ticket. So I literally went from Cleveland to Toronto to Tel Aviv. It turned into a 22, 23-hour flight. Got there, obviously language barrier. I wrecked my first car in the first week because I thought when the light was blinking yellow, that means cautious to slow down. Over there, it means speed up really, really fast. And so I got hit because I wasn't moving fast enough. So learned a valuable lesson there. But I played in Bratislava, Slovakia, Beijing, China, Chatham, Mexico, Natal, Brazil, a city called Italy, Greece. Been over to Belgium, all these places, like even I played in those two countries for like more than say 6 months, but the other places I played with USA Basketball and coach taking us out the country to France and Switzerland and all that stuff. So had been very blessed to travel the world and see a lot of amazing places.
So from that professional experience, what noticeable differences are there from playing professionally in the WNBA compared to playing professionally just in the overseas realm?
Well, great question. The biggest difference in the WNBA and international, I would say, when you go overseas, it's only like 2, maybe 3 Americans on your team, and the rest are all international players. There are some locals, but then I had a Turkish teammate, a Russian teammate. So that's the main difference. And usually when the Americans come in, you're supposed to score all the points, grab all the rebounds, and play all the defense because that's what they pay you to do. That's the big difference when you say WNBA, international basketball. There's a lot of expectations for you to come in and produce. And, like, you literally can't play around. Like, every game you play, you better maximize and put the numbers up that they need to win. And that's bottom line. You have to win.
So during all this time, when did you decide that a coaching career was for you, or you wanted to pursue it?
Well, like I mentioned to you before, Al really is the point person that I have to give credit for just putting this on my mind. I always said I never wanted to coach myself. I was a knucklehead. And so I was like, no, that's not me. But the more and more, like, being around the game and then the interaction with the student athletes just made me want to be around it more. And it's like, wow, look, 18 years later, going into my 18th season, and I'm still doing this, and I'm enjoying it every day.
Well, we're going to shift gears to some lighter questions as we can kind of get to know you some more. Okay. So what age did you start playing basketball, and who introduced you to the game?
So I started playing basketball when I was 6. I had some neighbors across the street. They had a big family. There were 3 girls and 2 boys, but their family was a close-knit family, and they had a bunch of cousins and in their family. So I would play with the girls, and the girls would play like house and do hair and, act fake like we're cooking food. But I was always like, the guys caught my attention in the backyard, and they will be back there playing, and the girls would get mad at me because they're like, you're paying too much attention to them. And then one day I got up the courage to ask, could I play? And so I played with them a few times. But then this is how, like, things kind of really changed for me. We played this game at the time. We called it booty. And so what the concept of this game is, like, going around the world. You got to make a shot and you got to finish, and you're out. Like, you're not the loser. Well, I started playing with those guys, but I became the loser all the time. So the consequences behind that is you had to literally put your hands on the pole, stick your butt out, and each guy back there, and it was always like at least 10 to 15 guys, they had 5 cracks at throwing the basketball at you. And the object was to, like, hit you on your butt or your back. Well, they were popping me in the head, on the back of my calf and my, behind. And so I used to run home to my mother, and then my mother was like, you're not supposed to be doing it. And I'm crying. And so I figured out that I couldn't go back and tell her I was doing that because she told me I was forbidden to go back there and do that. But that's how I got it started with basketball, from my neighbors in the backyard. And booty got me really competitive because when I kept losing, I started focusing in on my shots and making them so I can hit somebody.
So growing up, or even now, who's your favorite basketball player?
Favorite basketball player of all times, Charles Barkley.
So if you could pick anyone to shoot some hoops with, who would that be?
Ooh, shoot hoop with. Okay, so one of my all-time other players, because he was a defensive player, and I'm a defensive player, is that when I met Gary Payton in Seattle, and so him and I played one-on-one, and there was an article that came out that I had said I'm the glove. And so, like, literally he challenged me to a one-on-one game. Well, I thought I was a glove. I'm glove number 2.
So let's take a step back to your Tennessee days. Gardner-Webb head coach Alex Simmons also played at Tennessee. She won 2 titles at UT from 04 during her time at 04-09. You know, you won one from 98 to 01. But which Tennessee dynasty is better?
Oh, come on. Easy question. The team that went 39-0. You had the 3 Meeks on the team. That's an easy one. I'm not going to even talk about who she had on her team. There was 3 Meeks on that team that ran the table. And that year, we won majority of our games by 30-plus points. I think it was 2 games that we ended up winning by, single digits. But 30-plus points a game.
So have you two had a chance to kind of compare your eras and the times at UT?
No, we don't. We actually talk more about kind of what's going on with our team and stuff like that. So I obviously respect Alex, and I'm glad she was able to continue to keep winning those championships, which we're used to having there. So I'm very thankful, and I was always cheering her on because I if you cut me open, I bleed orange now.
So which current Big South women's head coach would you like to challenge to a friendly pickup game?
Ooh, to a friendly pickup game. Can I pick 2?
Sure.
I'm going to go with Alex, and then I'm going to say Honey, because, she has some she's been over in that Tennessee area right there. So I'm going to say Honey from UNC Asheville.
And, Coach, our last question as we wrap up, what is something about you that your team will be very surprised to learn?
Oh, that's a tough one because I tell them a lot about me, but I would say I played the instrument. So I was the trumpet player, and I literally had to pick from basketball or continue on with my music career. I would say the trump. And so I would say playing an instrument, but I do have a young lady on my team, a freshman. She plays 7 instruments. So we could get a little band going here with her and I.
Very good. Well, Coach, we really appreciate you taking the time today to let us get to know you better. We enjoyed the stories. We wish you the best of luck this coming season. And thanks again.
Mark, thank you so much. Safety is everything, everybody.